Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly study. I'm glad that you're tuning in and joining me. We have finally arrived. Genesis chapter 27 is here, the famous story of Jacob stealing the birthright, getting what's rightfully his. That will be for each of us to decide as we explore this text together. This has been, I would argue, probably one of the more famous and exciting stories of all of Genesis. We've been leading up to this moment for a number of weeks. We've been focused on chapter 26, the last, I believe, 3 weeks, that focused solely on Isaac's life. And now chapter 27 opens. Isaac is becoming older, and he is ready to pass on the birthright blessing to the rightful son, the firstborn son, whatever that may mean. And so, as we know, probably just from the story, if not, I'll just kind of give you a brief summary, and then we'll kind of focus closely on some of the verses today. Isaac is going to believes he wants to give the blessing to Esau. And Rebekah hatches a plot and maneuvers and makes sure that it's not Esau that receives the blessing, but that it's Jacob, because he is the rightful heir. It's a really amazing story. It's quite dramatic. Many of us may be familiar with the kind of the ins and outs of the story. It's fantastic, and if we I didn't want to run through it so quickly that we would just do it all in 1 week, but that we would really take our time and enjoy the story and think about it and take some meaning from it. So the most burning question, what I've just already mentioned, is Jacob stealing the birthright? Is he taking something that's not rightfully his? Our close readers, those who've been following along from week to week, remember that it was early on before they're about to be born, when Rebekah is pregnant and she goes and seeks out God to ask what is going on. And God gives her a prophecy and says that it's going to be the younger one who is going to be in control, who's going to lead. And so the younger one in the birthright is Jacob. And Jacob is going to be the one, at least according to that oracle, according to that prophecy, that Jacob will be the one who is the rightful heir. We also see that just in a little briefly at the end there of chapter 25, when we learn about the ways in which Jacob and Esau act. Esau seems to be a pretty crass person, a hunter, someone who is really just interested in fulfilling his own desires and passions, perhaps we could say. And Jacob doesn't seem to be that way. He seems to be smart and a bit kind of strategic or conniving. But it seems like from even the surface reading of the stories that it's Jacob who will be the one who's able to carry out the lineage. We remember even from last week at the end of chapter 26, we learned that Esau goes and finds wives from the Canaanite population, from the foreign population. So already he's thinking of himself as kind of stepping outside of the family tradition, and that it's Jacob who is going to be the rightful heir. So really, I think we can challenge this sense that it's really that Jacob is stealing the birthright. Perhaps it's actually rightfully his. Remember even from before that Esau sells the birthright for that pot of lentil stew. So I think it's complicated. I think that's where I'll leave it. It's complicated. Before we jump into the verses, one more thing that I wanted to offer as a framing in terms of kind of our own spiritual takeaway from this is there something that you have wanted in your life that you realized that you faced an impediment, something was blocking you in the way, and you maneuvered in such a way to be able to get it? What might that have been? I think each of us throughout our lives have faced blocks, impediments for what we may want for our family. And we figured out ways to make that happen. And I think this is a story that teaches us about that, teaches us about how our ancestors worked, how Rebekah and Jacob worked to make sure that the blessings were in the right hands. So please join me and stay with me as we begin chapter 27 and look at the first 10 verses together. When Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." He answered, "Here I am." And he said, "I am old now, and I do not know how soon I may die. Take your gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open and hunt me some game. Then prepare a dish for me as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my innermost blessing before I die." Rebekah had been listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau had gone out into the open to hunt game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I overheard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat, that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, and I will make of them a dish for your father, such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat, in order that he may bless you before he dies." These first 10 verses describe, in a sense, 2 different scenes so far. The first scene is Jacob instructing his son, Isaac, instructing his son Esau to prepare him a meal in order that he give him his final kind of birthright blessing. And then the camera shifts, so to speak, to Rebekah, who has overheard Isaac's command and conversation with Esau, and then she prepares a plan and a plot with Jacob to make sure that Jacob, can procure that rightful blessing of his. So there's something very important about this birthright blessing. We've talked about this in previous weeks as well, when we learned about Jacob and Esau as they were younger kids, and that story of the lentil stew, and the exchange for the birthright. There's importance to this, and it needs to be done, it seems, within the older generation's lifetime, that there is a bestowal of actual blessing that Isaac can give to the next generation, so that they can kind of take on that authority, that leadership, that status, and carry it with them. And so within the ancient world, and also in our days as well, there's something important about making sure you receive that blessing from the previous generations. Back in biblical times, that blessing meant important financial status, which was very important to make sure that you received those blessings. And for us, I think we can think about it especially in terms of making sure that you have received the proper blessings from your parents that you can kind of take on to the next generation. So Isaac's eyes have dimmed. We'll notice in this story, it was pointed out by a commentary that I was reading, that all of the senses are going to take place in the story. So first we hear about Isaac's eyesight. It's dimmed. And now we can think about it at kind of 2 different levels. One, Isaac's eyesight has actually dimmed. He can't see that well. And this is a kind of really important foreshadowing, because Isaac's eyes will be tricked, and he won't realize that he's giving the blessing to Jacob when in fact he thinks he's giving it to Esau. But I think what the eyes dimming also teaches us is that Isaac doesn't have good vision, not just the physical vision, but kind of the spiritual vision to realize what's important. And he thinks that it's Esau who's going to be the rightful one, the best one, to carry out on his legacy, when we know already, but know from our readings, and will kind of continue to know, that it's really Jacob that is going to be the one who's able to really take on the family legacy. He calls out to his son and asks him, son, where are you? I think the exact language here is really evocative and reminiscent of just a previous few chapters when we learned about the binding of Isaac. Let me just pull up the exact language, right? He calls out, my son, and he answers, here I am. That, we remember, was back when Abraham and Isaac were talking. Back when God was speaking to Abraham and asked Abraham, go, sacrifice your son. He calls out, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham says, here I am. And here again we have this moment of calling out to a son, and here I am. But what's remarkably missing here is that Isaac is just focused on himself. He doesn't say, allow me, Esau, to give you the blessings of my father with God. He just says, prepare for me a dish so that I can eat it and I can give it to you before I die. Isaac is all about him. So again, back to that vision that is dim, not able to see so well. And so as much as this story is about the kind of transformation of Jacob into now the heir of the family, as we'll learn and we know will happen later on, this is also a story about the education of Isaac. Isaac's eyes, who are dimmed, is going to be kind of re-educated and given a new vision to realize who is going to be the rightful heir to his family. It's interesting that there needs to be this exchange for blessings. Why can't Isaac simply just say, I'm about to die? Esau, here is my blessing. There needs to be some type of exchange. I wonder what you make of that. At some level, I think it's a part of blessings can't just be given freely. I think we feel that with our own lives and our own relationships. Yes, we can bless others, but it's because of our relationship to them, our connection to them, what we believe they give to us that then we give to them. So at this level, perhaps it's a sense that Esau needs to provide this meal for this kind of transaction of the blessing to take place. It was interesting. This reminds us of the previous story back at the end of chapter 25, where, remember, Esau comes in from the fields. He's tired, and he smells that Jacob is cooking a pot of lentil stew, and he says, give me that, and I'll sell you my birthright. And here, just like his son, Isaac is also willing to transfer the birthright and to give those blessings for that food. And he thinks he's going to die. Remember, if we remember the language of chapter 25, he says, Esau says, what's this birthright for me when I'm about to die? I'm going to just give it to you, Jacob. And here, Isaac says, I'm about to die. But we know that if we look closely at the text and kind of follow along the chronology, it's going to be many, many years before Isaac dies. It's hard to kind of calculate exactly, but it seems like it's at least 40 more years before Isaac passes away. So again, the sense that Isaac's vision and sense of what is going on is actually not that great. Rebecca overhears this, and she has a plan that she takes into action. I think it's pretty amazing here. This Rebecca is really an amazing character here. And she tries to figure out how she can make things happen in her way, the way that she believes is going to be the best, and the way that kind of most of us as readers will accept and follow along with. And so she works within the system. She knows that what she's going to do is going to cause terrible, terrible damage. It's going to be irrevocable once Jacob gives that blessing, and then once Jacob realized that it's not Esau that he's giving the blessing to. That Isaac's going to give the blessing. That's not going to be Jacob. That's not going to be Esau that he's giving the blessing to, but rather to Jacob. And the family is going to break apart in some way, but she knows that this is important, and she needs to make sure that this gets done. In some ways, she has a better vision than Isaac in knowing what is the best for their family, knowing that Esau will not be the best heir for the continuation of their family's traditions. Rebecca's been listening, so the senses come up again to what Isaac said to Esau. And she says, now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. As I read that, I was like, how many times have each of us heard from our mothers saying, listen to me and follow everything that I'm going to tell you? This is a common trope that all of us experience with mothers, telling telling us to listen to them and to follow their instructions. I thought that was a cute little piece there. That we've all had moments where our mothers have said, listen to me now. And Rebecca's really taking charge, really being able to move what's going to happen and change really the course of history within her kind of ability to do so. It's really, really, really striking. Um, we're going to pause here. We'll get Isaac's response and continuing with that next week, but let's just pause for now. And I'll end with the way that I ended, the way that I started, is that thinking about for you, not only in this story what you're kind of taking from it as well, but what were those moments in your life where, at a personal level, you wanted to achieve something, you wanted to acquire something, but there was a block in the way, and there was an impediment, and what did you do to make sure that you could try to achieve that? So I'm happy that you're joining me. I'm glad that you tuned in and that you're thinking about these really rich and beautiful stories. And we'll continue next week. Have a great day, everyone.